Surge have been met with tons of issues this season, right? A team that's underperformed based on the expectations that were set for them at the start of the season, a team that's made multiple roster moves involving their bench players. They've utilized mid-series substitutes. They had beaten only one team and one team only coming into the most recent event, and had what's considered to be one of the best and rather greatest players of all time in Call of Duty history retire from their team mid-season. The Seattle Surge, by far, have had one of the roughest seasons out of anybody in the CDL. And that is the reason why I believe we're having this conversation right now. If it wasn't for the outrage and understandable frustration that we saw from the Surge players, we probably wouldn't be having this discussion right now. But you know what? I'm happy that we are. I'm glad that we are. And I want to make very clear that I am not on the side of social media bashing, especially when it relates to Call of Duty and esports for that matter. And in this situation, and what transpired after the Faze versus Surge match, I wasn't on the side of the approach that players made. But I also, at the same time, am not unaware of the reason for why they did it, right? Can you honestly answer the question, if Seattle didn't react the way that they did, would the CDL have taken action? You know what? I can't answer that. You can't answer that. And players can't answer that either. And my worry is that players for the future will look at that example and think, you know, it worked for Octane. Maybe it'll work for me too. Listen, this needs to stop. I don't know the precautions that the CDL are taking for social media slander, if fines have been handed out, but this needs to be addressed, right? Players need to be given a separate outlet if they haven't been already. They need to be given a separate outlet provided by the CDL so that players can express their concerns. They need to feel like they're being heard, because if not, players will look at this as the only means to get something accomplished. They'll start to believe that slandering and using obscenities, calling the CDL a joke, will actually get them what they want. Oftentimes, an audience listens to the players. They side with the players and they start to go along with their arguments, even if it's not really true, right? And depending on their situation, it often can lead to the community getting behind a situation that could be justified, or could also at the same time not be given the full story. They may jump on a story that they're only hearing bits and pieces about. Like I said, I'm not defending the players' actions on this or in any situation previously, but I realize from both parties, there can be another way. Listen, I have said for years that I believe being labeled as a professional means that not only do you play like one, but you also act like one. And historically, Call of Duty hasn't been that way, right? The culture is different around the esport. While it has helped the esport in terms of storylines and it's developed, many different personalities over the years, it also at the same time has held it back from being taken seriously from a lot of people out there. So I, for one, am not on the side of the approach, but I am on the side of the reasoning behind it. To lay out the situation, for those that aren't aware, essentially, the Seattle Surge comes into, without question, one of the most lopsided matches based on predictions that we have seen so far this season. I mean, it is arguably the worst team coming in versus arguably the best team coming in. And to everyone's surprise, the Seattle Surge found themselves up 2-0 versus Goliath, right? They close out an Azir Cave Hardpoint in game one, 250 to 175. They close out a Search and Destroy on Gunrunner in round 11, which for them and for which a lot of people know in the community is not very common for them to walk away with round 11 victories. And then as we get ready to load into the game 3 domination, the CDL runs into technical problems. Technical problems that were rather not super well made known to the stream. We were having updates kind of start to come through on social media, but technical problems that resulted in a 45-minute break between map 2 and map 3. Now, for those that have heard the reporting around the claim that this was simply an audio issue and keep saying, I can't believe the CDL shut down the stream just because the audio wasn't synced. Listen, from what I have been told, it wasn't simply just an audio issue. It was rather an issue that had to be addressed in order to get the stream back. The issue on the tech side couldn't allow for the broadcast to function. So it wasn't just a minor issue that they were trying to tweak. Instead, it was actually an issue that couldn't allow for the broadcast to come back. And don't confuse what I'm saying on this, because it is important to realize that it wasn't just a minor delay. Like I said, it actually did matter. Listen, as someone who has worked on broadcast, as someone who's been in the control room for multiple events across different esports, I can assure you the last thing the CDL or any production team for that matter wants is to affect the games or to stop them from continuing. The last thing a production team wants is to be a nuisance. And I realize that it's fun to pick up the pitchforks, but realize the production team has no interest in trying to make the breaks last longer than they have to. They have no interest in trying to give FaZe some time for a breather, even though they may be considered the more popular team of these two. And as much as people like to put on their tinfoil hats and speculate and tweet and make videos that the CDL is rigged, clearly aren't educated on the matter. It's ridiculous. Some of the tweets that I was getting, some of the tweets that I saw in regards to this. So getting back, the Seattle Surge and Atlanta Faze are left to resume after the 45-minute break. FaZe then proceeds to roll over the Surge in domination. They clutch up in the hard point and win one of the craziest Game 5 Round 11s that we have seen all year long, and Celium clutching up a 1 versus 2. So how do you handle this, right? Surge were up 2-0, 45-minute break. FaZe then goes on to reverse sweep. How do you handle this, right? I mean, from the Call of Duty League side, they have to get the stream up. From the players' perspectives, they're frustrated because the Surge feel that the momentum that they had would have carried them into their best game mode that could have resulted in them winning this series 3-0 or 3-1. So how do you address this, right? And for those that want to try and argue based off predictions, don't try it. Right? Don't try and justify the break and say, well, it wouldn't have mattered. It wouldn't have mattered anyway because FaZe were part of a lot of reverse sweeps this weekend. Listen, that's trying to argue something that has no factual backing to it whatsoever. Trying to act as if this break didn't hurt Seattle wouldn't be accurate. If the tech pause doesn't happen, could we have seen another result? Who knows, right? Listen, that doesn't matter. What matters is that the actual result very well could have and was in some way messed with because of this technical problem. And technical problems, both small and large, have been part of the CDL broadcast for pretty much every home series. More than I would like, but I do realize at the same time that this wasn't something that they were prepared for in the first place. Well, they should be prepared for every situation. I get that, right? I am totally on board with that. But I also do realize that there is this little minor thing that's kind of going on in the world. It's kind of attacking the entire planet right now. This global pandemic that's called COVID-19 that is throwing everyone for a loop. I extend grace, but I also at the same time realize that competition was not put first. The broadcast was. Competition and broadcast both are reasons for why Call of Duty Esports is where it is today. Competition, if it wasn't for that, if it wasn't for the players, nobody would be here, right? There would be no foundation for this whole thing whatsoever. The broadcast, the reason why Call of Duty has elevated to where it has, the reason why we have prize pools and have franchises invested. Franchising wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the broadcast. Franchising at the same time also wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the competition itself. So thus you have two principles that both want the same thing, but also have two different approaches of getting there. Two different ways that they go about pleasing the ultimate result. And sometimes those things can affect each other negatively, which is exactly what we saw happen here with the Seattle Surge. Should they have had to wait for a broadcast problem? I believe that the timing of it is reasonable, yes, but that's a core component for why the competition is happening in the first place. But at the same time, it can affect the competition so much so that it ends up affecting the results, which is why I was incredibly pleased to hear about the change coming in from the Call of Duty League just a day after this happened, as they are now enforcing what is called the 15+5 rule, a rule which institutes that if there is a technical problem with the broadcast, 15 minutes will be given in order for the broadcast to return. If it's believed that a solution can be found by the end of the 15 minutes, 5 extra minutes will be given. So no more than 20 minutes for the future of any delays. And if there are problems that continue after that 20 minutes, the games will continue off stream. I like this. I'll be honest. I like this. And I appreciate the fact that it happened so rapidly after the initial problem. I think it gives a good distribution between competition and the broadcast and shows a clear understanding of what took place this weekend, right? The only critique that I can give is simply that I wish it could have come about earlier. I wish in a perfect world that this could have been prepared for, right? I don't believe I'm asking too much for that. Again, I've stated that I do extend grace into what has been a very difficult transition for a lot of people. But this is a franchise league that I hope for the future only learns from this and continues to get ahead of the game. And I believe that they've reacted accordingly. And the next steps are to ensure that the chatter in the community and the defacing of the league by professional players doesn't continue to occur. Or that's what I want. And the outbreak on social media doesn't continue to become the main source for how change is done. So is there a competitive integrity problem in the CDL? I don't believe there is. I don't believe there is a problem. All esports leagues and even sports leagues for that matter over the years have shown more interest in the teams that provide them the most exposure, which then provides them with the most money at the end of the day. Sure, in a perfect world, all teams have the same schedule. All teams have the 100% identical opportunity as each other and play the exact same amount of times. But we have to realize, especially given our current world's circumstances, that isn't physically possible. I don't believe that the term problem would be accurate. And if there continues to be an issue of which competition isn't put first, I hope that this 15+5 rule is only just the beginning for ensuring that competition is always at the forefront of importance. I think the CDL in many ways has shown and made efforts to make sure that the cause and the case of this only continues to improve, right? As sappy and as hard as it is to say, something has to happen first, right? Sometimes by being the first person, you have to be the one that endures change. And for Seattle's sake, I hope that they don't have to continue to be the pioneer or the guinea pig that has to take on all the adjustments.